Welcome to 'Tis the Soundtrack, the podcast dedicated to digging deep and bringing you the merriest of music all year long. I'm your host, Kevin Williams, and this is the second episode of our Merry Mixtapes series, where I sit down, digitally, with Gerry D, the totally awesome host of the Totally Rad Christmas podcast, to talk about his mixtape, a collection of lesser-known holiday tracks from the decade that brought us Sectars, Stariors, and Square Pegs. If you're an 80s kid like Gerry and myself, or just find yourself a little 80s curious, you're going to enjoy this episode. If you want to know what the Merry Mixtape series is all about, you can check out episode 10 of 'Tis the Soundtrack, where we discuss the origins and what you can expect from the series. You'll find the track list for Gerry's mixtape in the show notes and at our website, tisthesoundtrack.com. You'll also find links in both places to the YouTube playlist containing all the tracks from Gerry's mixtape in the order we discuss them.
I love you and you love me too. Dance with me and I'll dance with you. Christmas Day we will celebrate 2,000 years of...
Joining me for the second episode of our Merry Mixtape series is Gerry D, the totally awesome host of the Totally Rad Christmas podcast. Thank you for joining me, Gerry.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you this evening?
You know, I'm a little harried and a little rushed, but I'm good. It's been a crazy evening. So yeah.
So I mentioned this with Ken when I recorded with him too, but the same is going to be true here, and the same is probably going to be true for any of these I record in the future. So it's highly unlikely that anyone listening to this show is not already familiar with Totally Rad Christmas. But on the off chance we've picked up a lost Christmas soul in the ether, Gerry, can you share a little bit about your podcast?
Okay, yeah. So my podcast, Totally Rad Christmas, is all about Christmas in the 80s mostly, but from 77 to 93. I give a couple of transition years on either side of the decade. You know, they didn't happen overnight. They didn't leave overnight. So I go from a little bit longer, but basically, it's a celebration of anything Christmas in the 80s. So we'll talk movies, we'll talk food, we'll talk fashions, we'll talk fads, TV specials, comic books, magazines, just really any. I did a whole episode on decorations. So just as long as it was kind of popular in the 80s at Christmas time, we'll talk about it. So a lot of toys. There's a lot of toy episodes as well. You've been on the show. We talked the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation soundtrack and score. And coming up, I don't know when this drops, but pretty soon in the next couple of weeks, the second episode that you were on, Lollipop Dragon, will be out as well. So it's probably around similar timing, which is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, and a fantastic podcast, especially if you were an 80s kid like me. Very enjoyable to remember all those things you've tried to suppress for the last 30 years.
For real. There was a lot of let's just throw everything in the wall, see what sticks mentality in the 80s. And a lot of it stuck and a lot of it did not. So...
It's also the decade that taught me you can just throw the word new in front of anything and you're guaranteed to sell something with it.
That's true. That's exactly right. That's so true.
So we created some basic rules for this series, which at some point I'm going to stop rehashing at the beginning since we're already recording an episode that chronologically people will hear before this one explaining the concept of the series. But it's in my show notes, and I found I just read whatever's on my screen in front of me, so we'll go over it quickly again. The rules were simple. A guest would come on, and they would choose a theme for their mixtapes and select their songs. There wasn't a song limit, but we would keep the total runtime under 74 minutes, since that represents the initial limit of a CDR when they first became widely available. And this is the second one of these episodes we've recorded, and I'm officially throwing that rule completely out the window. So
okay, good.
So Ken came on before you, and he submitted what we've now called the double album. So it was exactly 2 CDs worth, or 148 minutes on the nose of music. And I think I know the answer to this. Gerry, do you know how long the runtime was for the list of songs you submitted?
So I did some... No, I mean, I really don't. I did some quick math for part of it, and then I was going to add the rest, and I was going to edit it down, actually, to make it, and I just ran out of time. I didn't, so I know it's more than 74 minutes. I just don't know by how long.
So within a second or two, it's 120 minutes is what you came up with. So, so like I said, I think we're just throwing that one out the door.
Okay.
But I've got some headcanon to explain, so Ken's was easy, right? He is the guy that runs the Christmas radio station. Of course he's going to do a double album.
Right.
So my headcanon for this one is that you're just so immersed in the 80s that, what is a CDR? You can't write to CDs. These things are new.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So instead, you reached under that pile of Garbage Pail Kids cards and pulled out a trusty Maxell UR120 and just packed that thing to the gills, 60 minutes each side, front and back.
I'm into it. Yeah, that's great.
You're into it?
I thought for sure. I'm known, unfortunately, as the guy that kind of likes to Captain Kirk a lot of situations. So I don't believe in the unwinnable scenario. I kind of Kobayashi Maru it. So they'll ask a question like, if would you rather do this, or this? And somehow I'll come up with like an answer that takes some of those and incorporates something entirely new and kind of bends the rules a little. So I kind of thought you were going to go with that, but I'm okay with yours. Yours is better, and I like that.
I do like the idea, though, that you get three options and somehow you get all three options and something completely off the menu at the same time. That's fantastic.
It's a skill or a curse. I don't know, but...
So before we dive into the tracks on your mixtape, we do have a few questions to get the listeners familiar with how you went about it.
Okay.
So do you remember the first mixtape you ever made?
Yes, I do, actually. So I remember it was in the late 80s, and we were recording from a blank tape to a blank tape on my dad's radio. There was a way that you could actually hook it up to another radio. And so we were taking tracks that we loved from his tapes that he had, and we were putting them onto this new one. And the sound quality, of course, was terrible, but it was awesome because it was everything that we wanted in a mixtape. I think we had, so it must have been around 89 because I remember Like a Prayer was on there. So
Nice.
that's one. I think Love Shack was on there as well. Those are like the only two that I remember. But I remember my brother and I like sitting down and actually doing this. And then it wasn't until really high school that I started like getting into actually making mixtapes. And I would start structuring things certain ways and trying to pick my favorite tracks from all these different like Metallica albums. And so it was like a Metallica's kind of greatest hits, but not just greatest hits. It was like the ones that I liked more, like my greatest hits of theirs, and Chicago is another great band of mine. So I would make mixtapes of just Chicago and their songs and, all their, and it was almost the greatest hits. It's stuff you'd mostly find on greatest hits albums, but there were like songs that you just could not find other places if you were just to go by, like the Eagles' greatest hits. Most of the time they don't have like Seven Bridges Road on it, and so you have to throw in your own stuff like that. So the very first one we made, yes, was it with my brother and I, our own tape to listen to on a trip to, I believe it was Dallas at the time, and so to get ready for that, we made that tape.
Oh, that's fantastic. I shared with Ken on the last episode that my first tape started off before I even knew you could record off the radio onto cassette. We had an early VCR, and it had coax or whatever at the time to go out, and it also had a RCA set. And so I found out by playing around and plugging things into places that you could plug a cassette recorder into the spare audio jacks on the VCR, and you could
Nice.
stripe off the audio as it was playing on the TV. And so my first, without spending all the time on it, my first bit of music was the Beach Boys' I Get Around from the scene in The Flight of the Navigator, because that was, I think, the first
Nice.
real song I heard that wasn't kids' music that I enjoyed. But similar to your story, once I realized that I could throw that same cassette tape in my parents' component stereo system and record off the radio, I mean, that just opened up a whole new world. So I remember probably a couple years later sitting with my telephone on redial and calling the local radio station to ask them if they were going to play the Simpsons' The Bartman song when that came out.
Nice.
And they're like, yeah, it's in rotation. And then listen, a song would go by and I'd call him back again. And all right, when is it coming up? I've got to go to bed at like 9 o'clock. And so I need you to play it before then so I can record it. And as an adult, I realized, yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
No,
That's,
no.
You know, but
I did the same thing. I actually called the radio station. It was the oldies station. I was, at the time, all my high school band, the songs that we would play in the stands, I wanted like the actual songs. So not just like, the
nice.
band. So the song was Vehicle by the Ides of March, I think, or Ides of whatever it is, something. So it was that one. And I asked them, I said, can you please not talk because I want to record it. And so over the entire intro, the DJ talked, and which good for him. I mean, that was like piracy, But I didn't know. Same, just like you, I had no idea. I thought it was great. It was okay.
Yeah. Why would they broadcast it for free and give me the thing that can record it if they didn't want me to do that?
Exactly.
To a 10-year-old, that just made complete sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on from that, can you share a little bit about your relationship with Christmas music?
So, of course, I'm raised Catholic, so Christmas music has been a huge part of, at least nowadays, it's a huge part of the Mass for Christmas time. So usually we'd hear like, "O Come All Ye Faithful" at the beginning. We'd hear somewhere in there like "Silent Night," "Away in a Manger," and usually "Joy to the World." And then throughout the Christmas season, which starts on Christmas and keeps going, we'd hear like "The First Noel," "We Three Kings," and like all those kind of traditional carols. So I knew those, and those were kind of in my DNA from really, really young time. In 1986, my dad bought the Time Life Treasury of Christmas album, and so he had it on cassette, and it was like 2 cassettes, each had a side A, side B, and I think he might have even had 2 more cassettes after that, but we had it, and that was like the soundtrack to our Christmas after that. So that's where I learned about Bing Crosby and Perry Como and all like the crooners and their style. It's where I learned about Dolly Parton and her Christmas album with Kenny Rogers. I mean, it was a huge, very eclectic kind of Christmas album. There were a lot of instrumentals from like orchestras that were just fantastic. And so I've always loved Christmas music. Now, in the 80s, I was more into cartoons and toys than I was music. I watched MTV with my dad a lot. I loved it. But also, I would rather watch G.I. Joe than MTV, or He-Man. So I wasn't super like tuned in to the whole Christmas music scene, but I knew about A Very Special Christmas. I knew about some of the other things that were out there. I just didn't really listen to them that much till later on in life. And of course, when Chicago, like I said, I really loved them when they did Chicago 25, which they've then re-released under a new name. But when they released that one, it was a Christmas album. And so I really started digging into Christmas music after that. And ever since then, I've kind of just found more and more as I've dug. And especially in the 80s, now that I've started the show, I have pages and pages and pages of Christmas music from the 80s that no one's ever heard of, or that very few people have heard of. And I want to get to them all eventually for my show, but they're just, I mean, like, if I just changed into an 80s Christmas music show, I could go on for at least another 10 years. And, of course, I'm not going to do that. So if I wanted, I have material for decades, and I'm excited about it. I tried to whittle it down for this, but yeah, Christmas music, I love. It's always been in my life.
So you kind of jumped into the next question there, which
Gotcha.
Probably wasn't a hard one for people to guess, knowing your background, your podcast. But what was your core concept that you used when you compiled this list?
So everybody knows, do they know it's Christmas? They know Last Christmas. They know the Eurythmics sing Winter Wonderland. There's a slew of songs that people know from the 80s that are Christmas songs. However, there are a ton of songs that nobody knows or very few people realize are Christmassy or Christmas related by artists that you might recognize. So the whole point of this particular mixtape was songs that, at least here in America, because some of them are popular somewhere else, but at least here in America, they're lesser known 80s Christmas songs. And there are some real winners on this.
I think it's probably the most Christmas synthesizers you're going to hear in 120 minutes.
That's
I
right.
don't know that exists anywhere else.
That's right.
So final question before we get started here.
Yeah.
Who would you give this mixtape to? And it could be a particular real person in your life, or it could just be the type of person you think would enjoy it.
Well, I think for sure if you're into strange and unusual alternative kind of music, especially from the 80s, so new wave, no wave, mutant disco, if you like, some of that just alternative style from the late 80s, things like that, I think you're really going to like this. But honestly, I was making this tape for younger me. So, someone that
That's great.
if I was like 5, 6 years old and I wanted to know about Christmas music in the 80s, this is the tape that I'd give myself.
So this was a struggle I had when I was putting my notes together. So I'll briefly share. My format when I do this is the guest puts in their list, and I go and try to compile this. And I had these grand designs of compiling it on all the streaming platforms so it could be shared out to people. And what I've quickly found doing 2 of these, and I don't think that's going to change in the future, is like you hit on, some of these are obscure, or at least obscure over here, and they're not available on the main streaming platforms. So
Right.
YouTube has been the platform of choice. I can find almost everything on there. So I put together this playlist on YouTube last week when you sent it to me. And I've been listening to it on my lunch breaks and in the car coming and going from work, and making my notes as I go. And I think you hit on this in your last episode that just dropped on your podcast, just trying to categorize some of these artists. You mentioned new wave and no wave and mutant disco, and there's disco punk, and there's, just the various versions of prog. And I gave up about 5 songs in of trying to make a note and explain it to people. It's that wonderful mix of 80s stuff.
Yeah. I think you just have to call it 80s and kind of call it a day, because there's some. And in this particular list, I do run the gamut of everything from like country or folk rock, all the way to that kind of mutant disco or no wave, whatever you want to call it. And there really is it's a very eclectic mixtape. But the one thing that holds it together is that I feel like every song. I feel like every song, at least stylistically, fits. So while the actual arrangement might be different, I think if like one person sat down with all these songs, they could make it work into like a seamless symphony. They could actually transition from song to song, and it wouldn't be as out there as far as like chord progressions. It wouldn't be out there like tonally as some of the other albums are, I feel.
No, very good point. And my less music theory version of that would be if you threw this on at a Christmas party, you're not going to have that dead stop in the middle of it where you clear the floor, where everything changes and people have to stop dancing and moving around. It does. And you said no particular order, but I went ahead and just did it in the order you sent it to me.
Okay.
And even that order, it works. I've played it a few times over the last several days, and I didn't have to hit the skip button, which is great.
That's always a plus.
All right, so let's pop in that Maxell cassette and get started. I will go ahead and I'll just give the name of the band or the artist and the song title, and then you can jump in and explain why you included it on your mixtape.
Okay.
So starting things off, we have the Steve Miller Band with God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we have gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
So, I'm a musician. Whenever we're coming up with a set list, it's also like coming up with a playlist, with the mixtape. And while I probably would have arranged a few songs here and there differently. I like to start off strong, and then you build your energy a little bit more. But if you don't have a good, strong opener, you pretty much lost the crowd. It's really hard to get them back after that. So this particular song and version of it is God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, which again I knew from growing up Catholic. It's a traditional carol. I think most people have heard it. The Bare Naked Ladies have a great version of it. I did not know this particular version until I did an episode with Ken I think last year. It might have been 2 years ago. And so it's from an album called Christmas in the Northwest Part 3. I believe it's from 1989. And it's literally just a bunch of different artists, mostly from that Northwest area. A lot of them are local artists. A lot of them are, I think there's like polka bands included on it and different things like that. And Steve Miller Band was actually one of them. Of course, there was also Ann and Nancy Wilson. But I heard this. It's just a rockin', groovin' version of the song. It starts off, there's a strong backbeat, and even though he only sings one verse, even he repeats the verse a couple of times, but he only sings the words to one verse. It's a cool version with a nice little solo in the middle, and yeah, I like this song. And Steve Miller Band, I mean, you can't go wrong with Steve Miller Band.
Yeah, it's a great version of the song. Very strong number one to start out with. Completely agree with that. You'd mentioned the Christmas in the Northwest series, and you were spot on. Album 3 came out in 1989. So this is up in my neck of the woods, and this series has been going on since the mid-'80s when the first one came out, and I think there are over 10 versions of it, and it was always very Seattle for the folks in the Northwest who know what that means, because it is just an eclectic mix. You'll have a more well-known artist on there. You'll have Steve Miller, you'll have Hart, you'll have in the later ones like Harvey Danger and stuff like that on there, and then you'll have a bunch of local bands or local ensembles that contribute tracks to it. And then you also get the mix of adopted bands, like Dave Matthews Band shows up, which has nothing to do with Seattle at all, except for people up here in this area. There's this big amphitheater called The Gorge. And almost every year, Dave Matthews Band shows up for 3 days in a row. People camp around it for all 3 days and show up to all 3 shows. And so he's like an adopted son of the area. So I'm assuming
Nice.
that's why
That's probably
he shows
why.
up on that album. But it's also a very weird and very Seattle series. So each of the albums was financed or backed by a bank or a financial institution. So U.S. Bank did it one year, Pacific Northwest Bank, Royal Bank of Canada. But then
great.
all the money goes to a charity. So Children's
Nice.
Miracle Network, Children's Hospital Seattle, the one close to me just up the road, Dornbecker Children's Hospital on the OHSU campus in Portland was the recipient one year. So
Nice.
very cool series and awesome track. Moving on to number 2, we got Robbie Robertson with Christmas Must Be Tonight.
Our little baby boy, bring the people so much joy. Son of a carpenter, Mary carried the light. This must be Christmas.
Yeah, so this one was a semi-popular hit from the band back in the 70s. Now, for the Scrooged soundtrack in '88, he actually re-recorded it. He sings vocals, there's more synths, it's more up-tempo. Instead of the beat on, I think it's usually, let's see, I think he had a backbeat on like 3, and it was just like 1, ba, it was just really laid back. Here, they kind of double time feel it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so that adds a lot of energy to it. And so it makes the song push forward more. But it's just a nice, simple song. A lot of these they're very simple chord progressions. I think this one's even in just the key of G. So it's, a lot of like 1-4-5s, minor 6 thrown in there. But his voice is more airy than when the band sung it. It's lighter. It's just something about it kind of floats. There's a cool little backing vocal track, and the melody played on the synthesizer just sounds a little bit cooler than the band's version of it. And I know people that really love the band are gonna harp on me, so please direct all hate mail towards Totally Red Christmas and not "'Tis the Soundtrack." But no, I really enjoy this version, and I like I like Robbie Robertson, and I like his voice here. I think he does a fantastic job, and no one knows the song, which is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So I knew the Robbie Robertson version because of Scrooged, but until I was putting together notes for this, had no idea that when he was part of the band, they did it, a decade before then. So
Right.
I'll share a little bit of your hate mail. I listened to the band's version for the first time last week, and I was like, it's fine.
Yeah,
There's nothing
same.
wrong with it, but I like Robbie's version better. So,
Same, yeah. Yeah, it's just, it drives, right? There's just more of
Yeah.
a driving beat. Yeah.
for number 3, we have Chris Squire and Alan White with Run with the Fox.
Are you hopeful? Are you haunted?
Yeah, so who knew that there was a prog rock Christmas song? So if you like Yes, you'll like this song. Of course, those guys are former members of Yes. They were on hiatus at this point, not quite fully broken up, but almost broken. I mean, unofficially broken up. And so they went out, they recorded this, Run with the Fox, along with the B-side, Return of the Fox, which is an instrumental version of it. Just tweaked a little bit here and there with some added bits. But it's a cool little... like harmonically, they go from the one chord to a 5 sus. So there's no third in that 5 chord to kind of bring you back up to the 1. And the dissonance, like the major second that you hear in that 5 chord, just kind of hangs there for a bit and adds a little bit of tension, but not enough tension that it sounds like jarring, just enough tension to kind of bring you back nicely to the 1. It's just a really cool version of the song. It's barely Christmassy. I think they mentioned Christmas like twice, in the actual lyrics. But the song itself, it's just a nice progressive rock jam. I'm sure it's a metaphor for something. I don't know what it is. I'm a physicist. I have a degree in physics, not literature. So I'm sure there's like a cool, deeper meaning to Running with the Fox. But it's just there's like horns. There's like some synth orchestral parts. There's a nice little choral section in the breakdown, and yeah, it's a great little tune, and I highly recommend it.
This was another one that I was not familiar with until it showed up while I was driving in the car on your mixtape, and it is really cool. It's I'm learning that Yes and members of Yes have done a lot more Christmas music than I was ever aware of.
Spoiler alert for later.
Yeah. Yeah, we're foreshadowing a little bit here.
That's right.
Yeah, you hit it. The synths in there. I had to look it up. It was the St. Paul's Boys Choir that provides the choir part to it, and just a really cool track that and this is the part of this that's fun for me is it's a track that I probably would have gone another decade and never heard if not for doing this.
Right. And this is one that, again, I had no idea until I just started researching for my show. And so I did a little mini episode on it, and I thought, oh, that's cool. Let me listen to it. And I kind of fell in love with it. And I said, yeah, I need to put this like on everything. So again, you read the lyrics and you're like, how is this a Christmas song? But, there's a section that says, have yourself a Merry Christmas, eat, be glad, and drink the wine. So, all right. Yes, sir.
Yep, I'm counting it.
That's right. That's right.
Moving on to number 4, we have Hanoi Rocks with Dead by Christmas.
I'll be dead by Christmas now anyway. Hey, tell me, will you remember me that day when you found a new one who's better than I ever was?
So I know they were a popular like glam rock band. They kind of believe they were Finnish, maybe. It's somewhere around there. I could be wrong about that country of origin, but the only thing I really knew about them is that their drummer Razzle famously died in a car accident where Vince Neil from Motley Crue was intoxicated and he drove, and unfortunately it caused the death of their drummer. This particular song was written he was with him. It was prior to their actual, prior to his death, but not very much. And then it was re-released on like an album of B-sides. It was released as a single, and then kind of nothing really happened with it, and then released on an album of B-sides after his death. So it was about a year later. It has a cool little piano part that I wouldn't have expected from a glam rock song of this particular style, because there are elements of like early hair metal in it, but there's still elements in Hanoi Rocks, at least from the song, elements of like the actual like New York Dolls type glam rock as well. And so there's this little piano bit where it's just kind of like playing straight eighth notes, and it just kind of jamming on it. But there's also cool electric guitars, and subject matter aside, some people thought that it kind of foreshadowed, it was like a strange foreshadowing of his untimely demise. But this song jams, and it's just a cool, it's tune that gets stuck in your head really easy. I'll be dead by Christmas now. I mean, it's a catchy song, and it's hard to get it out of your head once it's in there. So you're welcome, people.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
You're absolutely right. So chronologically, this one was recorded just after their first album, and then for whatever reason sat on for a couple of years after that. So, like you mentioned, came out after their death. And this is one I just learned about a few years ago because it was on the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday soundtrack.
Right.
And you're right, it gets stuck in your head. It's got just a catchy tune to it. It is a little hard to shake once it gets in there.
Right.
And I imagine because it's got the James Gunn touch, right? Blue Suede, got a huge bump after it was in the first Guardians movie.
Right.
All those songs that now kids who are like my son's age, 12, are listening to because they showed up in that series. I think this one would have probably been pushed out a little bit more if it wasn't the shortest bit of music that was used in the holiday special. So, yeah. So for folks who have seen it, it's the first scene with Kevin Bacon, and he's just getting out of his car in the driveway while he's talking to his wife on the phone. And you hear it for maybe 3 or 4 seconds when he opens his car door, and then it turns off as soon as he shuts it.
Yep.
And so, had they somehow just stretched that out, or not made it the stereo in the car and just let it be the overall music while he goes into the house, I think it would have probably seen a big resurgence a couple of years ago, like some of the other songs did off that album.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it is a great song. Of course, subject matter aside.
Yes. Number 5, we have Ecstasies, Thanks for Christmas.
Yes. So technically the song was released under the pseudonym The Three Wise Men. They're the ones that actually sang it. However, it's a British band XTC or Ecstasy, however you want to say it. Which is also funny that they even recorded a Christmas song because famously their lead singer is an atheist. But they wrote this song. They originally wanted, I believe, the staff, like some of the secretaries of their record label, to sing it under the name like the Virgin Marys, and then they decided, no, we're not doing that. So they recorded it themselves and sung it under the Three Wise Men. The B-side to this single is just like, we need a B-side so that this record doesn't warp. It's like the worst. It's just countdown to Christmas party time. But this song is really actually a brilliant song. So there's like a nice little like piccolo trumpet or toy trumpet playing this opening. So it sounds almost grander than it's going to be. And then they get into it and it's light and poppy and sounds very 60s. With the main theme. But there's some really cool chord progressions in there where like they modulate to the key of B flat all of a sudden, and you're just like, whoa, where did that come from? So musically it's very interesting, but also it's just nice and catchy. And while the chords themselves in each little section are rather standard for progressions, as far as progressions go, the transitions just from one section to the other are really nice, especially there's a little chromatic bit, bum, 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 and then they get back into the main riff and melody there. So yeah, just great song. Again, super catchy. No one's ever heard of it, or very few people have heard of it, I should say, but that's kind of our theme here. So
Yeah. So you're in good company with this one. This one also made Ken's list.
Yeah.
And it is. It's no notes on this one. It's a great song.
Agreed.
Next, we have number 6. I'm excited to talk about this one, too. It's Jon Anderson with Three Ships.
I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day in the morning.
Speaking of Yes, we already heard from some of the instrumentalists of Yes. Now we're going to hear from the vocalist. So this one is semi-famous for a tiny bit in 1985. Because there was a terrible, terrible music video that was released on MTV that they played. It is bad. It's like there are bad videos, but this one's just really bad. And they played it a few times, and then it just faded away into obscurity. The entire album is like a prog rock, very like heavy synthesizer, but still very Yes. I really enjoy the whole album. It's great. There's like a cool, almost gospel-y, quasi-gospel-y version of Oh Holy Night on it. There's his daughter singing Jingle Bells really sweetly. There's a Ding Dong Merrily on High. And then there's just a bunch of original songs that are super cool. But for some reason, This version of I Saw Three Ships, which is just named Three Ships, is the one that stands out to me. There's modulations immediately. So they sing two verses, bam, key change. And then they sing two more verses, and then we're going to go up another. They change keys again, and it keeps getting higher and builds. And then there's this nice, just instrumental, almost airy section with the actual like counter melodies and things that are going on in the background. It's a cool bridge. And it's I Saw Three Ships, so it's in 6/8, which again is not very popular for mainstream Christmas music, and it kind of sings. I like it.
Yeah, this is another one that I just recently learned about. So when I recorded with Ken, he had "Easier Said Than Done" from Jon Anderson as one of his.
I almost picked that. Yeah.
And it's kind of out there too for his take on it. So I think it's fair to say if you like Yes, or even if you just like the popular songs of Yes, this isn't too far off from that. And if you enjoy that, you're really going to enjoy this too.
Right.
So I think before it was on an album, this came off a 1985 EP, and I think it was just titled Three Ship, and it had this song, Oh Holy Night, and Easier Said Than Done on it. So I'm getting kind of excited now because you picked Three Ships, Ken picked Easier Said Than Done. So I'm just hoping with all my Christmas heart that in a future episode here, someone picks Oh Holy Night and we complete the trifecta. And so...
right.
Because I had a little more time than I needed before we started this, I had to expand on that idea and say, all right, well, if we've completed the Jon Anderson trifecta, what happens? And so where I went with that is everyone cues up their song, they're holding it, and then you get the Voltron intro, and you do something like activate turntable, RCA's connected,
That's right.
Volume up, speakers are a go.
I love it.
Activate interlock. Dynatherms connected. Infracells up. Mega thrusters are go. Let's go, Voltron Force!
And then some kind of prog rock Christmas Voltron forms together.
Oh, I want to see that so bad. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure before I head home tonight, I'm going to put that in an AI generator and see what pops out.
I'll post it. Yeah, for sure. No, it's the whole album's great. If you get a chance to track it down, they re-released it, added some songs, not from the 80s, just other songs all over. Even with those added songs, it's a great album, but the original was just fantastic as well. Some really cool stuff. A lot of like major seconds, things that we heard in the other Yes group as well. So you're right. If you like that, and you like Yes's stuff, especially some of the more prog rock stuff like Roundabout, you'll kind of enjoy this whole album.
We'll move on to number 7 here, and this I think was one you foreshadowed a little bit when you said these songs might be new to people, at least over here. This is Shakin' Stevens with Merry Christmas, Everyone.
Yeah, so this one's a kind of cheat. So this goes back to my Captain Kirkishness. This one is super popular in Britain, England, the UK especially, but also in other parts of the world. And for some reason, it just never translated, over here in the US. It could not break through. It didn't even have that stiff competition as far as Christmas songs go in 1985. So for some reason, it never made it. But it is a very cool song. It's up-tempo, almost rockabilly, not quite full rockabilly, but almost like a 1950s style rock and roll band. And it's again, catchy tunes, simple chords, which you'll find a lot of that here. And he sings the heck out of it, and I actually got the chance to play this at
that's awesome.
A little gig I was playing at with a buddy of mine for Christmas. We were just background musicians, and we're just hired to sing some Christmas carols here and there, which we like to do just cause. And we got to a point where we ran out of a lot of like the standard ones, and we thought, well, what Christmas songs should we do? And so I pulled this one out, and he had never heard it before. I said, just follow me. And it was fun. We had a blast. And so it is a lot of fun to sing and play. And same thing. It kind of grooves and it pushes forward a lot, which I like. I like high energy kind of stuff.
And you're right. This one doesn't get a lot of airplay on your, radio stations that go Christmas during the season, which is really weird. You hit on that it came out in 1985 in the UK. It was their Christmas number one, which, if you're not familiar with that, that's like a big thing to see what the Christmas number one is for the year. And like you mentioned, it didn't have a lot of competition. It was recorded a year earlier,
right,
and purposefully held back so it wouldn't compete with Band-Aid's Do They Know It's Christmas?
And George Michael's Last Christmas as well.
And George Michael's Last Christmas, yeah. So you would think, being the Christmas number one and not having stiff competition, it would have made the leap over here, and it just hasn't. I first found out a few years ago listening to podcasts. So before that, completely unaware of the song.
Yeah, and it's just a fun, up-tempo tune. So it's a nice little party tune, It's, you're gonna find that girl and kiss her underneath the mistletoe or kiss by candlelight, something like that. So, it's cool. It's a cool little song.
And it leads very nicely into our next one, which is also kind of a fun jangle pop tune. It's Chris Stamey and the DBs with Christmas Time.
I can't believe it's Christmas time. Where is the year we left behind?
This one is hard because if you try to find this album, Christmas Time, by Chris Stamey or Chris Stamey and the DBs or the Chris Stamey Band, you'll find like 3 or 4 different versions of it. It was released, I believe, in 86. I might be off on that. But then it was re-released in like 93, and then it was released again in like 2000 something. And each time they took songs off, they added new songs. And so you have to track down the original version. And there's a couple of cool tunes there that I really, really love. It's a Wonderful Life. Sha-La-La, which is like a version of Deck the Halls that Kathy Harrington sings. And it's really just Chris Stamey, who is part of the DBs, kind of breaking off and doing his own little solo album, but including all his friends. And later on in one of the versions, they invited, because he was part of, I think, Big Star, so they invite Big Star and they do their version. They added their version of Jesus Christ on it, which is a great song. And it's just again, you're right. Jangle pop is like, or jingle pop or whatever you called it, is probably the best way to describe it. There's the guitars have a lot of reverb in the beginning. It's almost country-esque in the amount of reverb that they use, and chorus, but it's not quite. And the harmonies are very reminiscent of like late 60s, early 70s groups. It's just a fun song. And I know I've said that for a lot of them, but they really are. They're cool songs that you got to check out. And time stands still at Christmas time, right? I mean, it's true.
Yeah, you hit this one too. Like you said, it was originally released in 86, and it's been pressed a bunch of different times. I think the last one was in 2015, I think.
Probably. I think you're right.
But yeah, it's Chris Stamey and Friends, or the DBs and Friends, or Chris Stamey and the DBs and their friends, or however many permutations you can get out of that combination.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think this is the clever Pokemon way of doing things, is if you want to hear all the songs, you got to buy all the versions of it, because you need them all to eventually get everything that was on there.
That's right. It's like Stravinsky with his rotational arrays. You just got to keep, you'll eventually get all the combinations and all the songs. But yeah, that's exactly right. But it is just another catchy, simple tune that will get stuck in your head.
For number 9, and this might be a perfect example of 80s marketing, just adding the word new to the beginning of things. We have the New Monkeys with What I Want for Christmas.
Can you feel it's the time of year for friends and family to share holiday cheer? Let's try to give and share the love, 'cause that's one thing that we all need more of. What I want, I ain't got peace on earth you can give me.
That's right. So the Monkees were huge. They were a band put together for television, not even really a band, just a pseudo band that then became a band. And they tried to do the same thing in the 80s. It was huge. MTV played a ton of like the original Monkees leading up to the series, and they called it the New Monkees. Turns out only one of them did most of the singing on just about everything, including all the harmonies. But on this particular version, there are actually all the people singing. Now, the song, in order to promote the show and to take the marketing to extreme, they released an album, and one of the songs on the album was What I Want. And they ended up for a promotional album, Yulesville, in 1987. So it's literally just a promo album. They recorded the same song. Everything's exactly the same except the words. They re-recorded the words, and they added What I Want in parentheses for Christmas. And so it's a nice song, What I Want, Peace on Earth, it's cool. But I love this song. I don't know what it is about this song. It's the best one. It's kind of reminiscent melodically of that song by, oh gosh, it escapes me now. Da, 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 da,
Redbone?
Yeah, Redbone. Come and get your love.
Come and get your love.
Yeah, the melody.
Yeah.
Bum, bum,
Yeah.
bum, 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 bum. So it's very similar melodically to that. But then the guitar is just playing some simple, bum, 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 just with fuzz. Dun, dun, dun. And so I think I really, as much as I love complex and intricate stuff and cool harmonies, I love jazz, and when you add the sharp ninths and the flat sevenths and you're doing all these different things, but for some reason, just simple songs at Christmas time is kind of what I desire, and this hits all those right spots. It's up-tempo, it's some cool electric stuff, nice harmonies, peace on earth, so it's a good message. They nailed it.
Yeah, and you hit on that this came from the Yulesville album, which was a Warner Brothers promo album with a bunch of their artists on it that was sent out to radio stations or record stores or wherever you send those things. And a lot of the songs on here, and their follow-up one, Warner Wonderland,
Winter
I think,
Wonderland,
was the
yeah.
or Winter Wonderland. There we go. A lot of these tracks never made it off that promo album, or at least didn't for years and years and years until they were picked up in a greatest hits or a compilation somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you've got New Monkees, you've got Erasure, the Ramones, Prince and Ice-T, and then you've got other artists on the Warner label or their imprints that don't provide songs, but they do little guest messages in the middle of it. So you've got George Harrison and Depeche Mode, Brian Wilson and Madonna, Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac. Oh, you've got a copy of it?
Both.
And you've got a copy of both of them. That's awesome.
But yeah, there were a lot of holiday IDs. So, when in between songs, they would just play this little, 10 to 20-second clip of, like you said, Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac just saying, hey, this is Christine McVie wishing you a Merry Christmas and things like that, just to, I don't know, have something to play and make sure that their artists are still known. They couldn't record a whole song, but here it is. And so it was really marketed to DJs. It was like, here, look, play some of these tracks. We want to promote their actual albums that are coming out soon. And unfortunately, some of these songs, not all of them, some of them are kind of oof, but some of these songs are quite good, and they just never made the light of day ever again after that.
So before we move on to the next track, because this is a podcast and it's audio, I need to take a minute and just talk about what happened on the video that I'm seeing, which is Gerry, who is recording in a closet right now, reached behind him and out of nowhere pulled out both the Yulesville and the Winter Wonderland albums from just like magically behind shirts, which was just an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, well, if you think that's cool, check this out. It's a Karate Kid Daniel LaRusso figure, the toy.
Oh, mint in package still.
On card, yeah. That's crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I have my Castle Grayskulls like, I don't know, a foot from me, a foot away from me. So, it's a mishmash in here. Eventually I'll get my own room where I can I can put up all my 80s stuff and record in peace, but for now it's in the closet along with all my all my knickknacks.
So without getting too sidetracked, I wasn't allowed to put mine anywhere in the house. So my office at work is where all my toys live. So I've got my Legos I've got Lego Voltron sitting next to my computer monitor.
That's amazing. I want to get that eventually.
It was a fun build, and he will alternate sometimes between Voltron form and the Lion form, just depending on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah.
For number 10, changed a little bit tonally here, and we've got Bonnie Tyler with Merry Christmas.
Happy birthday, Christmas. Welcome home, Jesus.
Yep, it's time to slow it down a little bit. You got to take a little bit of a break and catch up. And so the next three are a little more on the slow side. So this song is from the 1989 movie 3615 Code Père Noël, or Dial Code Santa Claus, or Deadly Games, or Game Over, whatever you want to call it. It has 4 different titles depending on who you ask. It is a French film that for some reason got Bonnie Tyler to sing this song. It's almost, she has that real raspy kind of breathy, raspy voice. It's a little scratchy, but it's nice. It's a little saccharine, but I really like it. And mostly because it's tied to this movie that I had no idea. Like I like mentioned, I have like pages and pages and pages of this stuff. I mean, I think it's up to like 14 or 15 pages long of just different 80s music. This is one that completely missed me until I did an episode on this movie. And like, wait, was that Bonnie Tyler? And sure enough, it was Bonnie Tyler. So, yeah, it was written for the movie, I believe. There's a B-side to the single called Funky Christmas. I can't seem to find it anywhere. I have to track it down. If you have it, please send it to me, because that sounds amazing, but I haven't found it yet. But yeah, it's a kind of a slower song. There's a lot more lighter synth stuff going on, and part of the reason I love it is because it's played while the kid is just kind of sitting in his rocking chair, kind of rocking back and forth. The Santa's tried to kill him. He's already killed his dog. I mean, it's and the kid's just trying to cope before he has to like go full, Stallone and Schwarzenegger on this guy. So it's amazing.
Yeah, so this is post Total Eclipse of the Heart, post Holding Out for a Hero, Bonnie Tyler, coming towards the end of the 80s, and just a lighter synths. I haven't been able to find the Funky Christmas B-side either.
Yeah.
I went down that rabbit hole for a little bit once I found the single listed on Discogs, and didn't turn up anything, but definitely interested to see what that's all about.
Agreed.
Number 11, this is another one of my favorite ones on this list. This is Jethro Tull with Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow.
Why not spare a thought in this day for those who have no flame to warm their bones at Christmas time? Say Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow.
So first, let me say, I do have an episode on Jethro Tull coming out. I'm not really a Jethro Tull fan. Mostly because of that Grammy situation that where they won the Grammy for Best Metal Performance or Best Metal Song, whatever it was, and Metallica didn't, even though they had literally just played the heck out of their song One, which is one of the greatest metal songs of all time. So, I kind of had a bone to pick with Jethro Tull after that. But also, I was a little traumatized by, I played in a band with a flautist, and she's a great person. She's a great flautist, but she also didn't know when not to play. She played through everything, and it kind of traumatized me. So whenever I listen to Jethro Tull, it was like, I just can't. It takes me back to that time where it's like, please stop playing flute. Like, just play the same thing on like a guitar. That's fine. Play it on a keyboard. I don't care. But the song itself, I heard the song only recently, and probably like last year. I'd never heard it before, just because again I wasn't really a Jethro Tull fan, and I immediately loved it. It's in 5/4, so it's not your standard 4/4 time. It's he does something with the flute where he kind of trills it, and I don't know if it's like something that he does with his tongue, or with just his air. In this, I don't know the particular way he does it, but it almost has like a cool, like mystic, like magical Native American kind of or native vibe. I don't know, something he does is super cool. And then all of a sudden it's just like guitar, and you're like, wait, what happened here? And they get into it and it's in 5/4, 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4, and it's the time signature's intense, harmonies are great, and of course, classic Jethro Tull, they use the image of Jack Frost as winter and the hooded crow, which is a symbol of death. And they're talking about, like, be good to your fellow man because of wintertime. Like, that's a harsh winter and they could die. So, like, come on, step it up in classic Jethro Tull preachy kind of way. But he veils it very nicely in this imagery. So I love the song.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this one until you sent it over, and I really like this song.
Yeah.
It's the same as a lot of Jethro Tull for me, which whipsaws between Ren Fair and hard rock, and that's all right.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not Aqualung at all. It's definitely more.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this one, and this was something that Jethro Tull and the band did, was they would go in and they would record a lot of material.
Mm-hmm.
So this was recorded in 1982 as part of the Broadsword and the Beast sessions, but didn't make it onto that album,
abandoned.
along with like 5 other songs. Yeah.
Yeah. They just literally were like, "Nah, we're good. Let's start over."
Yep.
Which is
Yeah.
crazy.
And so I think the first time I went back and tried to look for singles, and I think the first
it
time
was
this
in
was
86,
released.
right?
Yeah, it was the B-side to Coronach, which was
Right.
the theme from a British TV show.
British TV
and they just
show,
slapped
yeah.
this on the B-side of it to get it out there. And then since then it's been on Best Ofs. It's been on the
Right.
Jethro Tull Christmas album.
The re-release of the Broadsword and the Beast as well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the re-release of that, and it had all like 7 or 8 of the tracks that got cut from
were
the
li-
82
right.
one put back on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, just very cool song.
Yeah, I agree.
Number 12, another new one for me. This is Firefall with Christmas in Love.
Merry Christmas, baby, and Happy New Year, baby. Being thankful for the way we are together, wishing on a shining star. Spending Christmas with you is spending Christmas in love.
Yes, so I love Firefall. They're one of my favorite groups. There's a lot of history, and I won't get into all of it, but like You Are the Woman, Just Remember I Love You, Mexico, what's that one? It Doesn't Matter. I mean, which was kind of like a reworking of a Stephen Stills Manassas song. I mean, just great stuff. It's very country rock, very folk rock, a little bit of like southern rock, all kind of mixed in together to form their sound. This is one that, again, I was introduced by Ken Kessler. As much as I love Firefall, this was never included on any one that of their albums that I had personally. So I didn't know the song, and I looked it up immediately and I fell in love with it. Again, it's typical them. It is sappy and sanguine, and we're going to get into something harder in just a bit, but I kind of liked that we kept this mood. We brought us down just for a little. It's like a roller coaster, you
Yep.
bring it up, you go, or some people link it with flights, you take off and then you kind of descend. And then, maybe you hit your connection and then you start taking off again, which we'll do in a bit. But this was like the nice, just restful, easy song. And it's just a great song. Merry Christmas, baby, Happy New Year, baby. And it's easy listening, yacht rock type kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you said yacht rock. So up until a few years ago, my knowledge of Firefly completely started and ended with You Are the Woman, because it was a big hit and it got a lot of airplay.
Right.
And I probably heard some of the other songs off that first album, but I couldn't tell you they were Firefall.
Yeah.
But then when the term yacht rock came out, half a dozen years ago, or whenever that became popular, you'd see these lists online of greatest yacht rock albums, and you'd all have that late 70s to early 80s, all that kind of like easy rock. But you'd have Steely Dan would always show up on there, and Firefall would always show up on there, which makes sense. But
Right.
it always made me scratch my head because I kind of classified them kind of like what you were saying. They're a little more folksy, a little more country rock. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just that like completely like smooth, easy, late 70s rock.
Right.
So that was the first time I really started listening to them.
Yeah.
Apparently I've learned something about myself as I've moved into my 40s a few years ago. I like yacht rock, and I'm not ashamed of
That's
it.
weird.
So
That's okay. We're at that age.
it's
So I do have two stories about this song, about Firefall in general. So not quite this song, but in general. So one, in college, I was in the Century Singers in college, and we had to perform, or you either had to perform or you had to help at this big like fundraising show. So I decided I didn't want to make sets. I didn't want to paint anything. I didn't want to do any of that. So I was going to perform. So I chose that song, Just Remember I Love You. And this was the first time that I'd really just shown up, stood in front of someone with me and my guitar and my voice, and just sung by myself. I'd played in a couple of groups, I'd played in choirs and things like that. I'd never done it by myself. And so I sang the song. In the audition, I choked hard and I had to take a breath. They were like, okay, relax, it's okay. And then I finished it out and they're like, yeah, okay, we'll put you in the show. And then I'll never forget, the show came, I nailed it. I wasn't sure, I thought I did okay, but my director, like the whole choir director, he was just looked at me and he was just like, that was really good. And I thought,
well, that's awesome.
I made it. That's great. So a friend of mine later on had heard me singing. He's like, we got to record it. So we did a little recording version for one of our sound engineering classes. And then the other one was right before my wife, when we had dated like twice. We went on 2 dates and then we were like, all right, let's just be friends. She was going to take a trip with her friend to Europe. And she was asking for like songs, like, what songs do you recommend to pass the time? And so this was one of the ones I recommended, and she kind of latched onto it. And then she came back, and then we ended up dating afterwards. So those are like my two Firefall stories. And then Christmas in Love just brings me back. Every time I hear the song, it makes me think of them, makes me think of my wife. So good stuff.
Oh, that's an awesome connection.
Sorry for the long digression there, but
Absolutely fine. So we take a pivot here. You
Yes.
said you kind of brought it down for the last 3 tracks, and now for number 13, we turn over to Stryper with Reason for the Season.
You say that you got it figured out. What life's about. You do what you want to.
yes, time to bring the energy back up. This is typical 80s hair metal. But with the twist is that Stryper was a Christian metal band.
Yep.
So they had two. This is kind of a Christmas song. They had one really Christmas song, Winter Wonderland. And unfortunately, if you look for it now, the versions that you most will find is their live version. But they actually have a recorded studio version that's kind of fun. But, you hear some of the other, you think Winter Wonderland, you think like the Eurythmics mostly. In terms of 80s. So it's hard to like put that one on an album. This song is basically just, it's about Jesus being the reason for the season that we hear nowadays and see on bumper stickers and all that stuff. And it's just has some cool riffs, and it's just a nice way to bring some energy up. But really, I just use it as a seg to get into the next song.
So this one, you mentioned Winter Wonderland. This one came out, and that was on the B-side along with a extended version of this song that was 6.5 minutes. And
Right.
You didn't specify which one, so I went ahead and for the YouTube playlist that will be available to folks to listen along with, went ahead and put the 6.5 minute on there so you get the full Stryper experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And you're right. Just 80s campy, just metal fun.
Yeah, pretty much. But it leads into, and I know you're introducing it, so I don't want to step on your toes, but it leads into the next song, which I really enjoy.
Okay. And at number 14, we have Bryan Adams with Reggae Christmas.
We're having a reggae Christmas. Down in Jamaica. We're having a good time too. Hey now, we're having a reggae Christmas. America is a reggae New Year.
Yeah, so this is another one that I learned of only from doing an episode on MTV and their Christmas music videos. And from 1984, Reggae Christmas, it was a B-side to Christmas Time, which is the one that most people remember when they think of Bryan Adams singing Christmas songs. This one, as offensive as it is later on with Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman wearing a Rasta cap with dreads, doing a terrible Jamaican accent. The song itself, though, is rather fun. And again, most people don't remember it because it gets overshadowed by Christmas time. And it's literally just kind of a reggae beat. The song was written for, if I remember correctly, Ringo Starr. And he ended up not really responding to it at all. And then he had, of course, later on his own reggae song. And so for the composer kind of wrote another bridge with Bryan Adams together and brought it all home. But it's a fun song about being in the Caribbean. There's like some quasi steel drums in it, and it's a lot of upbeats, that you would hear typical in reggae. And it's just another catchy melody, we're having a reggae Christmas, it's fun. But yeah, seeing Bryan Adams, I don't know if that's cultural appropriation or not. I'm not even going to try to argue if it is or not. I don't care. It's just a good song. So.
Yeah, it was written with Ringo Starr in mind. Didn't get the reaction they wanted or didn't get the traction they wanted there, so Bryan Adams picked it up, and he sent it out at the end of 1984 as a fan club only single. And so you got Reggae Christmas, and on the B-side you had something titled Plum Pudding, which was just a holiday message from him. And then it became the B-side itself the following year for the single Christmas Time, which is the Adams song. If you hear him on the radio at Christmas Time is probably what you're hearing versus Reggae Christmas. Yeah, MTV did a whole big thing around it. Yeah, you mentioned Paul Rubens in the video. Yeah, there's a whole exchange with Bryan Adams where he pops out of the TV and then they go and play. And they're in the original 80s MTV studio in, I think, New York. And they've got all the VJs and personalities at the time kind of rocking out while Bryan Adams plays his song. And then, as you alluded to, Pee Wee and the Rasta Cap doing his thing. Yeah, it's... And then it just
fades away. Nobody remembers it.
Nope. Yeah. I definitely wasn't familiar with this one until I heard it, and this is another one where I was driving in the car at the time, and so I didn't put it together that it was Bryan Adams. I mean, I probably should have. A couple days ago, I had to put the artist in the song title in as I was compiling stuff. But things happen. It's a couple days later, and I had that pause, like, what am I listening to? And so when I got back to the office, go look at it, and I'm like, Bryan Adams, Reggae Christmas,
right?
And then immediately found the music video and all that other fun stuff.
Yeah.
For number 15, this one's fun too. We've got Bad News doing Cashing In on Christmas.
Hello, this is Dan Dennis. I hope you're all having a very Merry Christmas. This is our Christmas single. Please buy it and make it number one.
Yeah, so this is one that I only just recently... I remember reading the name years ago and not doing anything with it. And then just recently I kind of rediscovered it. So Bad News was kind of like a... So Spinal Tap was supposed to be a British band, but, they were played by Americans. This was like if Spinal Tap were actually played by British folks, and it was for, I believe, a show, not just an actual movie like This Is Spinal Tap. But Bad News was the name of this fake group that actually, just like the guys from Spinal Tap, recorded some music and eventually released them as an album. This is one, Cashing In on Christmas. It kind of makes fun of. It's like a satirical kind of bent on the Christmas shopping and everything about Christmas, and it's just them. It's also quasi 80s hair metal, just like Spinal Tap is, and just like Stryper actually is. And so it's just another upbeat song, and I haven't really broken it down. It's one of those that it's like I don't think I need to. I'm just gonna listen to it and have fun.
Yeah. So kind of in the same boat. I knew the name Bad News, didn't know Cashing On a Christmas, didn't know they did a Christmas song, but it had popped up years ago on, one of those clickbait articles of things you might not have known that Brian May from Queen was involved in.
Right.
And so,
Right.
yeah, so Brian May helped produce, helped with the writing of this album. And in fact, they do a cover
crazy.
of Bohemian Rhapsody that's decent. Like, it's not a bad, as far as covers go, it's not a
Right.
bad cover. I was laughing listening to this song. It's got a breakdown in the middle of the song where all the band members wish you a Merry Christmas, much like, other songs at the time did.
Right.
But it's very tongue-in-cheek. So, one of them was something like, I'm sorry I can't be with you this Christmas, but I'm in the Caribbean spending all your money, or something like that. And,
Yeah.
please buy my album. And they did release a 7-minute version. I think it's called the Let's Bank or the Let's Make Bank mix, which I love the
love these
meta-ness
guys.
of it. That
Yeah.
let's make a longer one because that'll make more money.
That's right.
So yeah, just fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. We are approaching the halfway point.
Oh,
this
geez,
evening
man.
for folks
Sorry.
following along.
Sorry, I'm talking too much.
It's still early my time. As long as you're good, I'm good, and we can keep going.
Yeah, I'm good.
So we've got a 5440 with 2,000 Years of Love.
I'm not saying he should be here now to walk among men and be God, but the message of love is still what he'd say 2,000 years
Yes.
ago.
So 5440, a Canadian band. You probably remember, well, you probably don't remember them, but they, Hootie and the Blowfish covered one of their songs. That's like their big draw. Every time I look at her, I forgot the name of the song now. I can't even think of it. But anyway, that's like kind of what they're known for. This song, and they have another one from Yulesville that I really like called Christmas Time as well. I just like this one a little bit better because it's so weird. So it starts off this cool song. There's like doing tapping on the snare. It's not like a full hit. It's like when they tap the rim, like not a rim shot, but like a rim click, and it's just this kind of almost R&B-ish kind of groove. But then it's just it's a 6/8 tune. So it's lilting and waltzy, and it's really really cool, catchy minor melody. I mean, it's nice. And then you get through a few bits of that, and then it just hard transitions to like,
Yep.
I don't even know. It's almost like a British horn band, like a little horn ensemble. Bum, 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 and the tempo drops, and all of a sudden, it's a strange transition, but for some reason it's so compelling. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that if they had just expanded the first part, it would have been an amazing song. Now that, but by cutting that short and adding this other section, it's just an intriguing song. It makes you question everything that you know about music. Like, how did these two things go together? But for some reason, it kind of works.
I've said this on a bunch of them. I really like this song too. I've never heard this song before until you shared it with me. About a minute and a half in, hard lefts from an alt rock tune to just a build back up with horns and then flutes and then strings.
Yeah, it's strange. It's like it's not really it doesn't feel like the real instruments. It feels like synths of all of them, of course. But it's just almost as if it was like a chamber orchestra, and they're trying to capture like that, or like one of those horn bands that kind of march around playing that you see like in Batman '66 when he's trying to get rid of the bomb. One of those kind of bands. But it's not. It's a strange thing. But I kind of dig it for some reason.
Yeah, like I said, the first minute and a half of it or so, it's this is tail end of the 80s, and it's kind of got that beginning of like what alt rock was turning into
Right.
at that time.
Right.
And then the entire rest of the song is something that wouldn't seem out of place like in a commercial that was like Renaissance period or something
Right,
like that.
right.
It's just
Or
got
like a
that
gazebo
feel
in
and
a
that,
park somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, number 17. There's another one I've got a whole ton of notes on here. This is Timbuk 3 with All I Want for Christmas is World Peace.
Transformers, superheroes, Thundercats, and cast iron
Yes. Yes, yeah. So I knew this one from I bought the album Lost Christmas, and I think it's from Volume 3. Most or a good chunk of that album is actually from the Just in Time for Christmas Christmas comp from 1987. Later on re-released in 1990 with some additional tracks, some really cool tracks as well. But anyway, this was from that, and I believe it was actually written prior to that, released as a single, but that's where I knew it from. It's the Purple album, Just in Time for Christmas. Timbuk 3, you might know them as The Future's So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades. That's probably what most people remember them from. This is like an anti-war, like military industrial complex kind of song. I really like it because it hits all the things that I loved as an 80s kid. All the things that he's complaining about is all the things that I loved as an 80s kid. It says Transformers, there's like mentions of G.I. Joe, and I think Thundercats are somewhere in there. I mean,
You even have a Rock Lords deep cut in there.
Rock Lords,
It's,
yes, that was another
yeah.
one. Yes. So it's like it named all my favorite toys, but then it's also typical Timbuk 3, where it really was just Pat, I can't remember his last name, but Pat and his wife playing, guitar and harmonica. And so it's just a nice kind of, again, with the backbeat, it really grooves. And it's, I don't know. It's just, it's something about it, even though I know I'm supposed to agree with it and supposed to change. Something about it makes me want to like play with my toys from the 80s.
Yeah, the version I'm linking to is the music video that came out for this. So folks will see it if they click on it and watch it. But the music video is, like you said, it's an anti-war, anti-military complex song. And so the music video is cuts back and forth between children opening all those toys, the G.I. Joe, the Transformers, and then, doing the things we did as kids with them, take them outside, make them fight against each other.
Right.
And it's cuts of that juxtaposed against cuts of, tanks rolling through fields and bombs dropping and, planes flying overhead. And, I think the connection they're trying to make there is that we're just indoctrinating children to
Right.
the military complex.
Right,
But
right.
you get to see some cool Gen 1 Transformers in there.
Right.
They've got a Jetfire.
Right.
Like front and center in a bunch of the shots, and feel maybe slightly conflicted there. Like you said, I'm supposed to agree with the message and understand how bad these are, but
man, I just want to
had
play
so
with my
many of those
toys.
toys. Yeah,
Exactly. Like, I just want to go play with toys now.
yeah, that and what I also thought was weird was in between those shots, they had the scene that's from the edge of the box that the Friendship Pagoda firework comes in, that shows like children lighting the firework. It's that firework that spins around on the ground and then it forms a pagoda, like the sections pop up.
Yeah.
And so throughout the music video too, it's just a scrolling scene of the little cartoon that goes around the outside of that box, and then somewhere near the end they actually light the firework and it spins and does its thing. But just a very strange music video, very full of 80s references, 80s toys. Timbuk 3, or you like Timbuk 3, or you've heard The Future's So Bright, I've Gotta Wear Shades. Very much in that vein. It's got the harmonica at the beginning. It's a very cool song.
Yeah.
18, we've got Siouxsie and the Banshees with
Il est né le divin enfant.
Better than I was going to do.
Yeah.
He is born the divine child.
Il est né le divin enfant, jouer au bois, résonner musette. Il est né le divin enfant, chanson tout son amour.
Yes, Il est né le divin enfant. It's a French carol. She released it as a single, and it is amazing. The cool thing about her version, and I have an episode on this song coming out as well, where we kind of really dive into it. The cool thing about this version, not only is it coming from like the queen of like goth, punk music, but is it the thing that your ear hears most is the harmony, not the melody. So if you're looking at the sheet music, you're listening to the song, the melody's there, but in the mix, the harmony line is actually a little bit higher than, like, it's mixed where the harmony is just a little bit higher in volume. And so your ear picks up on that, and it kind of just changes the song a little bit. So it's typical Siouxsie and the Banshees, but without sounding anything like Siouxsie and the Banshees. There's an orchestra, or at least a synth orchestra. Sometimes they couldn't always afford the full thing, but it's just a nice French carol that you wouldn't expect to hear from this harder edged musician that has faced various things in her past and has done things musically that you wouldn't expect, and has played with members of the Sex Pistols and things like that. So, but it's a lovely version. So I love it.
Yeah, another new one for me, and I'm probably going to upset all the Siouxsie and the Banshees purists, but the thing that it kept reminding me of is actually Fleetwood Mac's Tusk.
Oh, yeah.
So not the lyrics, obviously, but that like drum beat that's going
Right.
on in the background and the horns that kick in. And I know people will probably be very upset that I'm comparing those two bands, but that's where my mind kept going back to listening to it. I won't say, I've got some notes, but I won't say too much since you're doing a whole show on it. But this is...
Oh, that's okay. I mean, it's fine.
I was just going to say this is an example of one of those ones that went missing for a long time. So it came out in 1982. It was on a double A side. And then there was not a release or a pressing for, I think, like 20 years before it came out in a box set, like in the early 2000s.
Correct. Yep. And it's a cool little song that you wouldn't, again, it's just, I think part of the mystery and mystique is that you just wouldn't expect it from a band like that. And then they do it, and she sings it well. Sometimes she would purposely sing a little bit off key, like she would start, and then she would purposely like modulate her pitch in her vocals, out of tune just a little bit. That was like part of her style, but in this one, she doesn't really. It's great.
For number 19, we have the Hooters with Silent Night.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round young virgin mother and child, holy.
The Hooters, yes. So this was they're a Pennsylvanian band, American rock band there that just kind of, they don't really have like mega hits, although they did have some hits that kind of catapulted them a little bit, like they played it at Live Aid and things like that. But if you were to mention the Hooters, most people wouldn't be able to name one of their songs. I feel like most people in general, yeah.
Yeah, I went through this myself when I was doing that. So I went and Googled Hooters hits or whatever, and I got Day by Day and As We Danced.
Right.
And I listened to them, and I'm like, oh, I've heard those two songs.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you who the band was, or when they came out,
Exactly.
or anything like that. It's
right. Right. And so this is a Silent Night. It's 6/8, but instead of it's played with another very strong backbeat. So ba ba dum ba ba, 1 2 3 4. So really strong on like that 4 in the 6/8. And they almost sing it. The funny thing is the Hooters, they kind of combine a lot of elements in their musical style. So there's a little bit of folk, a little bit of like ska and things like that in their rock. But this one feels almost like Appalachian Mountain, kind of almost gospel-y in the way that they sing it. And again, I find that like whenever someone does something that's just something that you don't expect from them, like because people tend to stay very similar. That's why I think Sgt. Pepper's it was such a huge hit, because it was like such a huge departure from the Beatles' typical style. Well, this reminds me, not of that caliber, but you know what I mean. It reminds me of that same thing where I was not expecting this from the Hooters, and it's just such a, like, it's very abrupt. So Silent Night, like they just cut it off. It's a real staccato night there. And then same thing, like as they go, it just, because of that, it just meshes all together, and it still has kind of a power to it, even though it's still much more quiet. And so I enjoy that that dichotomy there of that intensity and that nice, just subtle song flow.
Yeah, So going back and reviewing some of the Hooters' other music, their, I guess, heyday, if you want to call it that, was, right at the late 80s, cusp of the 90s. And so, this was, right before everyone figured out what grunge was, and, we took a departure that direction. And so it's got that sound that's not too atypical for that time, but they, like you said, they incorporate like a folk or almost an Appalachian intro into a lot of their songs. You'll get a little bit of that first before it goes into the rock beat. Right. And this version of Silent Night is like they just stayed and kept doing that for the whole song.
Doing it. Right.
Let's see. Moving on, we've got number 20, Dolly Parton with Wrapped Up in You.
The gift of love is hard to find. I've searched my whole life through. God above has smiled on us this Christmas.
So, I'm dreaming of a Smoky Mountain Christmas. And if you saw that movie, you heard this song. And it was never released until, I believe it was last year. Might have been 2 years ago at this point now. But it was only recently released. And as far as I can tell, I could be wrong about that. But yeah, it's just a nice, beautiful Dolly song that she sings. Again, we're kind of bringing it down before we kind of build it up again as far as the playlist goes. But, it's a gorgeous song. She's talking about, she uses, of course, Christmas wrapping as the metaphor for her feelings and her love for this guy. But, 'tis the season to be jolly. How can I be blue? My gift of love, I'm all wrapped up in you. So it's beautiful. And it's just a nice, a typical Dolly song, but done in the 80s Dolly style rather than the 70s Dolly style.
I completely agree with that. No notes on the song at all. It's like you said it perfectly. It's a typical 80s style Dolly Parton Christmas song. And you're absolutely right on the release. So this, was for the 1986 movie, Smoky Mountain Christmas. And I think it got its first official release in 2022. So This is an example of kind of the Chris Stamey and the DBs thing.
Right.
Yeah, Dolly Parton started producing an album called A Holly Dolly Christmas in 2020. And it's come out each year since then. So there's a 2021, 2022 version. Right. And same thing. She's changing the songs up on it every time. And so if you bought the 2020 or the 2021 version of A Holly Dolly Christmas, not going to hear this song. But if you bought the 2022 version, this song's on there.
It's like the super mega deluxe bonus version or something. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's like that one, the Smoky Mountain Christmas, and there was another one, I believe. There was like 3 songs that she had previously unreleased. But yeah, it's just a nice, gorgeous song that she sings really well.
And moving on to 21, we have Albert Hammond with Under the Christmas Tree.
Warmest season of the year is here again. December is beginning to shine. A tingle's coming to the atmosphere again. So fine.
So I learned of this song. I know that Albert Hammond is like the lead singer of one of the guys from the White Stripes, I think. I don't really know a lot about him. I didn't do a whole lot of research on Albert Hammond. I was going to, and I just didn't. But I like the song. It's another fun, just upbeat. You kind of mentioned jangle pop, kind of. Yep. It fits very much in line with that. But I like the kind of call and response, the echo situation. So don't forget the. I mean, it's that makes it a little bit more memorable because they're literally singing it twice in your brain. So I like the song. It's, again, I don't really know a whole lot about it because I just haven't done the research on this one yet. Shame on me, but I enjoy the song. So I'll let you explain.
I don't know that I have anything to explain about the song. Albert Hammond's an interesting guy. He's probably, I would say, more well-known for his songwriting than performing. So throw a dart at someone in the 70s and 80s, and he's worked with them. He's written or co-written for Tina Turner, Bonnie Tyler, Chicago, Air Supply, Kansas. I mean, it's just that list of anyone who was big and popular in that time. Albert Hammond probably contributed to helping them do something with one of their albums.
Right.
And then this came out actually at the end of the 90s. I think it was a 89 single, and then it had an instrumental version of the same song on the B-side. This is coming up 22. We've got Book of Love with We Three Kings.
We three kings of Orient are
This is another one from like, I don't remember if it was from Yulesville or Winter Wonderland. It was one of those. It's another one that's out there. But I like it. It's very 80s. If you listen to it, it's synth. It's not quite high energy, whatever that style is. It's not quite that. It's but it's synths all over the place. And it's a Book of Love, who did have one big hit that I cannot remember for the life of me now. But it's just a very synthy version. And towards the end, they changed the lyrics. Instead of Star Wonder, it's like a Book of Love sends seasons greetings is kind of what they say, and that's like, that's like their bit. It's just a fun song, and I love We Three Kings. That's one of my favorite tunes, and so I think everybody needs to hear this at least once. Even if you don't like it, I think you need to hear it. It's one of those songs, it's like required listening.
Yeah, I had to go back and listen to this one a few times. So it's that 80s electronic, like you said, just synth-drenched song. It's
that's right. Yeah.
The whole beginning of it
yeah.
is just the whole beginning of it is just this spoken, like I had to listen to it a few times just to figure out what all they were saying there. And it's, they're let's go, Christmas tree, let's rock with Kings 3. And it's just, it's just, yeah.
Stream of
it's
consciousness. Fun. Yeah. Is it my favorite? No, but I think people need to hear it. They do that thing with the keyboard where they add like vibrato to it by using the wheel, the vibrato wheel, and it's just, but they do it fast enough that it's almost like a trill, dun, 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 which is very popular at the time, but it's bad. But I also like it. It's one of those where it's like so bad that I have to listen to it.
Yeah, and you're right. This one was on the Yulesville promo album, and another one where I don't think it surfaced again until a Book of Love anniversary collection came out in 2016. So that's, about 30 years there before it popped up again?
Like that, yeah.
Next one. So for this one, I was making notes super late at night. So the song is One Christmas Catalog by Captain Sensible.
He doesn't dance and he can't sing. One Christmas catalog, too many. One Christmas.
Yes. And so I was reading my notes. My notes said Captain Sensible. My fingers, I can't tell you how many times, north of 5, typed Captain Beefheart into Google and could not find any results for it. And I'd go back and look, and I'd go back and look, and I'd type, and it just wasn't working. And so finally I'm like, I don't, maybe the song doesn't exist. I've, gotta go call Gerry in the morning, and then did the smart thing and copy and pasted it out of the PDF you sent me. And then it worked just fine because it was just my brain short-circuiting and not understanding what Captain Sensible was.
Yes, so he was a guitarist for The Damned, one of their songwriters. The Damned, one of the most influential and early British punk bands. They kind of, I believe they actually had the very first punk single and punk album in Britain. They kind of brought punk to the States. He, at a certain point in his life, and I actually had the pleasure of talking with him. I had him on an episode specifically about this song. And he is like the coolest guy ever, but he was, he got to that point in his life where he wanted to do other things. And so there's a lot of use of the Fairlight, which was like a very high-end synthesizer used in the late 70s, early 80s. They sample pieces from, what's that movie? My brain is failing me now. It's been a long day.
The answer is not Captain Beefheart. I'll tell you that.
No, it's not. No. Citizen Kane. There's like elements of Citizen Kane in there as well, but it's just it is very synth heavy, but it's also not as synthy as the last song we heard. So this is a nice transition song to get us to the next one that we're going into. But at the same time, it's he said he wrote the lyrics because he found it odd that like something so ordinary and mundane, like people getting a Christmas catalog and being excited about it, he thought it was interesting, so he wrote the song. And the video is insane, and I love it. Where there's like a turkey that they're trying to cook, and he sneaks away and flies away, which it's very WKRP in Cincinnati turkey drop vibes there. But yeah, it's a fun song written by a guy that you wouldn't have expected to write something so catchy. But he really is a good songwriter.
Yeah, another new one for me, and I did link to the video version of this song, so folks following along can see exactly what Jerry's talking about there. It is an insane early 80s music video. So the only other notes I had on this one, and I was saving this for after we talked about all the tracks involved in it, but there was a album released in the mid-90s called Just Can't Get Enough New Wave Christmas.
New Wave Christmas, yes.
And it has this track on there. It's got Ecstasy's Thanks for Christmas. It's got the Timbuk 3 song on there. Despite being named Just Can't Get Enough, has no Depeche Mode on there at all, which I feel is an oversight. But
they did have an 80s
naming,
Christmas
right?
song, but it's just an instrumental, and it's depressing.
Yes. And so that leads us into number 24, Corey Hart doing his version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw him, you would even say it glows. And all of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They wouldn't let Rudolph.
Yeah, so this was live. This was a single. It was at a live concert, and it's just a straightforward rock version of Rudolph. And Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night is what he's most remembered for. And this is one that was available for a while on iTunes, and then they took it down. And so it's a great song. I like his version. It's nothing like a No Frills version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, And again, he kind of plays with the time a little bit to make it, fit, stretches a melody in certain spots. But other than that, yeah, it's just a good rockin' version.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, it's a live recording. It did show up as a B-side to Everything Is My Heart in '85. And then, oddly enough, it had a bunch of different pressings in Canada and Japan, where it was either the A-side or the flip side, depending on what they included it with.
Right.
So if you're looking for it online, or at least the limited amount of research that I did, those are the ones that show up more often, are either the Canadian or the Japanese pressings of it. And that leads us to 25, which is Erasure's She Won't Be Home.
Yeah, good old Erasure. So, it's kind of a melancholy song. Again, very synthy. Erasure, very a pop duo, a synth pop duo. So, a former member, one of the members was in Depeche Mode. He was also in, I believe, Yaz or Yazoo, however you say it. So he's had like a pretty good career before starting this band. The song, it's She Won't Be Home This Christmas Time. I did an episode on this a couple of years ago, broke down all the music stuff. I don't recall. It's been a long day. I haven't really dug into it, but I've always liked Erasure. Very popular, nice synth pop band. I wanted to put this closer to Book of Love, but I kind of felt we needed a little bit of a break between some of the synth stuff, so I inserted it here. It still flows rather nicely, but you can tell that it's like electronic drums. You can tell it's all the instruments are like, none of it is an acoustic instrument, which even the horn, there's like almost like a horn or quasi oboe bassoon in the beginning sound. And I really enjoy it. The song itself, She Won't Be Home This Christmas Time. Dad gets upset, but in time he soon forgets. It's a nice kind of melancholy song, but at at a good pace, like a nice like allegro that would get you, it would work at a party as a background song.
Yeah, those were about my same notes on there. Is it's a bit melancholy of a song, but it's got that drum machine. It's got those synths that just keep kind of pushing it along. So
Right.
yeah, fits really well, and yeah, good song.
Yep.
Moving on to 26, we've got Joan Jett's version of Little Drummer Boy.
They told me, ba-rum-pa-pum-pum, a newborn king to see,
Yes, recorded, released on one of her albums. I believe it was I Love Rock and Roll, and then like taken off for the second pressing. So they literally just put it on to cash in at the Christmas time release, which I love. That's amazing. I love this version. It's palm muted eighth notes. There's some cool things they do with like the flat seventh chord in the middle of the, in there just at the end, dun, 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 just to kind of add some interest. The drums aren't super heavy. I know it's Little Drummer Boy, but it's not like just a really drum heavy song, which again I love. I think that's brilliant. She sings the lyrics that nobody knows what the words actually are, and everybody thinks it might be some sort of Hebrew, but it's really not, version of it. So, but I just love it. It's a nice guitar forward version of Little Drummer Boy, and it's Joan Jett, so she's rocking it.
Yeah, yeah. So like you mentioned, this was on the first release of I Love Rock and Roll, and then later removed from reprintings of it. And it was the final track on the album, and probably a bit of a Christmas cash grab there.
Yeah.
This one also made Ken's list, and he's got a real sweet story about how he discovered it for the first time. This is my favorite version of Little Drummer Boy, and I enjoy this one for a couple of reasons. One, it's just a cool rock rendition of it. It's a long version of it. I think it's over 4 minutes long, and you've got a nice guitar instrumental that comes in and just shreds 2/3 of the way through for a while. But I think I may have shared with you, I've definitely shared on the show before, I have a rule in my house. I can't listen to Christmas music where other people can hear it, other people being primarily my wife, until Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah.
And then I get it through the new year, and then I'm
it.
done. So she said, working retail had soured her to Christmas music.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Little Drummer Boy is her least favorite song. And so doubly for me, I get the Joan Jett version, which is just a cool version. And sadistically, I get a 4-minute version of it I get to listen to really make sure I maximize it during my Christmas listening time, much to my better half's chagrin.
I understand. Yeah, I don't know what it is about Little Drummer Boy. A lot of people don't, they kind of don't really like Little Drummer Boy as a song. I'm not sure if it's just because of the standard version that we hear, like that Harry Simeone or Simone or however you pronounce it, his choir version. But I definitely can commiserate with you about wives and Christmas music. So...
Moving on, we've got number 27, and this will be a check for me to make sure I got the right thing here. This is Mojo Nixon with Transylvania Christmas.
Yeah, I get a little spooky here, but it kind of fit in with the Joan Jett Little Drummer Boy, and I just like this one. It's literally a 37-second song. It's Joy to the World in a minor key, which I love. You don't typically get Joy to the World, excuse me. We're talking Little Drummer Boy. You don't typically get Joy to the World in a minor key, and it's just him on harmonica, and I mean it's a fun little ditty, and it's just there just to seg, from one song to the next. But we go Little Drummer Boy to Mojo Nixon playing this weird tune from this EP of his that included a song called Son of Santa, and he like goes crazy and shoots people or something, to my next song. Really, I just use this one as a seg.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if I got the right thing because, like you said, it's 37 seconds long. It's their version of Joy to the World. It's got the harmonica on it, and then it's just over. So I thought maybe I was missing something there, and I grabbed the wrong thing or YouTube was just failing me.
Nope.
But I liken it to if you've ever gone into like a candle store and they have the mason jar full of coffee beans in there. And for years, I didn't know what that was for. And then one time, I think my wife probably said, "Hey, dummy, that's you smell that between the candles to reset your palate." And so that's how I'm viewing Mojo Nixon here. Is it's just a cool little reset before we head into 28, which is Morgan Ames with Sleigh Rider.
Sleigh rider is looking for you. Sleigh rider, what's he gonna do? Sleigh rider, he's got a surprise when tomorrow comes. You won't believe your eyes.
Sleigh Rider, yeah. So this was Morgan Ames was tapped to write an album for as a companion piece to the movie Silent Night, Deadly Night, and she did, and it was recorded and everything, and then it sat on shelves because the movie tanked, and nothing happened to it. Never released until recently. It was a few years ago that they released it, maybe 2016 or 2018. I don't remember the exact date, but it was just a few years ago. And the whole album is fantastic. All the songs, they're really great. They released it with the score, the actual score to the movie, and they released this along with it as a companion piece, and it's great. I mean, the song "Sleigh Rider," sleigh spelled SLAY, like to kill, and it's a pun, of course, being on that it's a killer Santa, but it's just a cool, bluesy, almost R&B-esque version of a Christmas song.
Yeah, nothing more to add there. This was a fun one too, and it sent me down the rabbit hole of listening to the rest of the tracks that came off the film, which are all fun, all fun and thematic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I almost picked because she wrote a couple of jingles that they use as well, and I almost picked one of those because those jingles are just great. Santa's watching, Santa's. But no, I thought let's go with an actual song, and yeah.
Then we change a little bit again, and for 29 we have Rainbow doing Snowman.
Yeah, so this was Rainbow, of course, Ritchie Blackmore's band after Deep Purple, but before Blackmore's Night. And so this was a cover, an instrumental cover at that, of the song, Walking on the Air from The Snowman. That's that British special that's super popular there, and again, just didn't do anything really over here. Maybe played just a few times. But it's an instrumental version. It's slower. It's got a bass drum. Like they slowed it down, bum 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 bum, and then just boom pow. But I mean, it's a cool, really atmospheric version of it. It's there is a flute as well, and some synths doing some cool little lines here and there, and of course Ritchie Blackmore's guitar. But yeah, it's just a nice transition and a nice kind of calming down after Sleigh Rider.
Yeah, to me, it's almost like you get this soundscape with it, and it's just this slow, expansive, song, and then, like you said, Blackmore just wailing on his guitar at different points in there, which is
amazing.
It's just cool.
Yeah, Ritchie Blackmore, great neoclassical type guitar player, but also heavily influenced by the blues. We get, you're right, it's almost, soundscape was a good way. It's almost impressionistic in the way that they structure like all the stuff, right? It's like almost like a Debussy kind of piece, but with an actual like tone, modal center. It's fantastic.
We're getting close to the end here. We've got number 30 next with Charlie Lay Couture's Christmas Fever.
Baby's born in the suburbs. Sleigh bells tinkle like a telephone bell. No donkey, no shepherd, not even a wise man over this crying angel's face. Crying angel's face.
Yes. So this is again for that ZE Christmas record called A Christmas Album. he was actually signed with Island Records, but because they were the distributor of ZE Records, then he did a piece for this album. It's an odd thing, but it's very 80s because the music itself, like it's one of the coolest guitar riffs I've ever heard. You know, it's almost like a reggae kind of ska beat, but then they add like these cool little fills in there, you know, just this cool little bluesy thing. And it starts off really nice. It's in a minor key, and then all of a sudden he starts, and I'm going to call it singing, but it's almost more like a spoken word.
Just spoken word. Yep.
Almost. It's like it's very William Shatner song. You know, and then later on there's some actual singing like in the chorus and the bridge that he does. But the guitar riffs and just all the music are what make this song so cool to me. And I know that there are actually more popular songs like Christmas Rapping from that album. There are songs that a lot of people would say are better, like Christmas on Riverside Drive, you know, by Kid Creole. But something about this one just seems like it's perfectly 80s because it's got like almost that style of singing like you'd find from like Nena, you know, from 99 Luftballons almost, you know, or that whole kind of genre. But then you get almost this cool bluesy thing going on with like some R&B flair, and I don't know, something about it just seems very 80s. So I had to include it here.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. So, quick plug. You just released your latest episode, which is talking about the album this is off from, which is the
Right.
Z Records Christmas album.
Right.
So I won't go into a lot of that because you and Scott and Ken did a great job with that, and everyone
Oh.
should just go listen to it
Thank you.
instead. But yeah, you mentioned Christmas rapping too. So for me, that was the only song I was really familiar with off this album.
Yeah,
And Z Records, kind of an avant-garde group of musicians that kind of went under that label or that imprint. And so it's just a bunch of weird stuff and some really good stuff too, but just a very non-cohesive mix of things in there.
Yeah, completely disparate elements just thrown onto an album and called a Christmas album. It is odd. But it's kind of like this song. Like this song is like a microcosm for the whole thing because you have this weird spoken word kind of bit, and then you have this cool like blues band over here that's doing their thing, you know, and somehow they put them together, and eventually they coalesce at the end and some of the other bits. But yeah, it's like it's out there.
All right, and we've got a pair bringing us into the home stretch here, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time for both of these because I'm probably going to butcher it. I did my best looking up the pronunciations ahead of time. So 31 is Bjork's Yola Katarin, or the Christmas Cats, and we'll just name them both here. And 32 is Sniglabandon's Yola Yol, or Christmas Bike.
Kapparnir birtir sem rattar úr bakinu grípa há og klærnar á loðinu löpa ljóta sjá Fýraða konurnar kepptust við kampa og vefstól og rokk og prjónuðu litfagran lepp eða lítið
Yes. Yeah, so these are some that I don't even know how I stumbled upon these. I literally don't remember. I think I just Googled Bjork Christmas song, and this was one, 80s, and this was one of the ones that came up. So Bjork, of course, Icelandic singer. Both of these are Icelandic, I believe Icelandic.
Yep.
And, there's a tradition of the Yule Cat. You'll find it referenced in several Christmas movies in that series with Tim Allen, based on the Santa Claus. What was it? The Santa Clauses, I think. They actually, you see Yola in there, and was it that one? Or it might have been actually, now that I think about it, might have been that part 2 of that Kurt Russell movie, the Christmas Chronicles 2. Might actually be that one that I'm thinking of. I'm conflating the two. But you actually see Yola, the Christmas cat. And so Yola's a Yola Koturin, which is this tradition of the Yule cat that if you don't get new clothes for Christmas, it eats you. And she sings this traditional Icelandic song, but again, it's so moving. It's very modal because it has that folksy element. There's a lot of there's a lot of pentatonic stuff, but then they kind of bring it home and set it in the minor key later on. It's just very and she has like folk instruments in it, but also, I mean, it's all sung in, the Icelandic language. I don't know what she's singing. I've looked up translations but at the same time, there's just something very compelling about it. Just the way she's singing it and what she's singing, and just the whole structure of the actual song. It's almost like AABB or something like that. I have it written down. I seem to have left my notes somewhere else, and so I'm trying to do everything by memory here. Not to pull the curtain too far back, but I was kind of rushed on my way here due to some unforeseen work events. But it's a cool Icelandic song. And as I was Googling her, I found this other band, Sniglabandið, that I'd never heard of. And they have another song that is about a bike that someone gets for Christmas. And it starts off and you're like, what am I listening to? Because it's like this fake horn. It's like this horn little intro, and you think it's almost sounds like something that would be playing over a loudspeaker that the government is trying to like motivate you into singing like the national anthem. Yeah. But instead it turns into just like an upbeat poppy rock kind of tune with just slightly distorted electric guitars singing this song in Icelandic. I don't know what it is about it, but they're just great.
It's a fun song. It's a fun way to wrap it up. So I didn't have time to look for it, but I did find that Christmas Bike was on a compilation originally, and I'm probably going to butcher it too, but going phonetically, it's Jólastund Medislenskulugum, which apparently, yeah, thank you, which apparently is a Christmas time with Icelandic songs. Yeah. And it was a whole album in 1987 of pop and other groups, Icelandic groups at the time, all contributing Christmas songs. I had written down a lot of them new, but I guess it's just a lot of them new to me. Like maybe Christmas Bike is some hugely popular song over there that they were covering. I don't know that, but lots of new, to me anyway, Christmas songs.
Right. And then Bjork. I mean, everybody knows Bjork. So, but I found it really interesting, her version of this traditional song.
No, it was really cool too. I knew it was coming as I was getting close to the end, and having listened to Bjork before, it was all right. What am I going to hear?
Right,
because
exactly.
It's quintessentially Bjork, but she runs the gamut herself of stuff she does, and so I was very much looking forward to what was going to come out of the stereo when I got to this point.
Right.
And then, like you said, Sniglabandið was just a fun, upbeat way to end the whole thing.
I think if they had done like a version in English, literally just done the same thing, released their Icelandic version, but then just translated it to English or changed the words and done it in English and sent it over, I think it could have had the potential to be a pretty decent hit. Yeah. But
I don't see why it wouldn't be successful. Someone should look into that.
That's right.
So we made it to the end. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around with us. Personally, this was really fun for me. I had a great time and wanted to thank you for putting together your tape and then coming on late in the evening for you and spending almost 2 hours here talking through it with me.
I know. I'm so sorry. I rambled on for a bit. But and the funny thing is, this is like my cut down version. I trimmed a lot of songs. There were so many more I wanted to add, but I tried to keep it as close to 74 minutes as I could get. And apparently the closest I could get is 120 minutes.
So that actually leads us into the next thing I have, which was, do you want to run through anything real quick that didn't quite make the cut?
Ooh, yes. Hold on. I have it all. I have it here. As far as songs that aren't really well known, and I think that's where, because I was going for songs that really aren't well known, because there's a ton of 80s songs that are great, but let's see, where is it? Making Toys from the movie Santa Claus the movie from 1985. So that's one that everybody knows. The main song, Christmas All Over the World, but like no one remembers some of the other songs, and that's one of them that I feel like just gets lost. Also, like Ken, I was going to put Easier Said Than Done, but I decided not to. Christmas Time Without You by Michael Damian is another really great one. God Rest the House by Jeff Lorber. The Gap Band has This Christmas from a compilation that's really cool. Let's see. This one's kind of cheat because, again, everybody knows it, but Jingle Bell Rock by Hall & Oates, but instead of Daryl's version, John's version. Not many people realize that John sang, it was like an A and a B, and he actually sang that. So, again, kind of a little bit of a cheat there, but I also just really enjoy that. Hark by Torch Song. I mean, I could go on. I literally could just go on. There's so many, and I really had to trim it down, and it was hard, but,
No, that's awesome. So I've alluded to it a couple times. My plan was to try to publish these playlists to as many streaming services as possible, but much like Ken's, a lot of this music just isn't available on streaming or isn't available on the same platform. So we're sticking with YouTube because that seems to be the best place to find these if you want to listen to them. So when this episode drops, there will be links in the show notes and links on the website to point people over to the YouTube playlist that has all of these songs in it. And so if you've been listening to us for the last 2 hours and you're all now jazzed up to see exactly what Gerry put on his playlist, you can just scroll down to the show notes here. You can visit the website and get the complete track list and the links to just start it up and play it. So before we close out, is there anything coming up on Totally Rad Christmas you'd like to share?
Ooh, so we're in October, and in October I always do a Halloween episode and a Christmas episode a week. So 2 episodes a week. I just dropped my Elvira episode as well, so I'm very excited for that. But I got some cool Halloween stuff, like we're talking Silver Bullet, Salem's Lot, so we're doing kind of a Stephen King theme. We talk Beetlejuice plus its sequel, Beetlejuice. I'm talking Video Power, that I don't know if you remember that game show from the 90s about Nintendo. It was fantastic. Yep. They had a Halloween episode. That's all my Halloween stuff. And as far as Christmas goes, let's see, hold on, where I have it here. As far as Christmas goes, I've got the Smurfs Christmas special, Amen. Our Lollipop Dragon episode that we did is going to be dropping as well this month, and then a few other things. So it's just a cool time. Plus I got some more like mainstream Christmas things that I've got ready to drop, but enjoy some of these obscure things like Lollipop Dragon.
for the 4 other people out there who know or remember
who have heard of it, yeah.
That's great. And where can folks find you or Totally Rad Christmas?
Yep, they can go to totallyradchristmas.com or linktree.com/totallyradchristmas, and you can get all my socials there. And of course, I'm everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Well, thank you again, Gerry. It's always great to talk to you, and I really appreciate you sticking it out for 2 hours while we went through your mixtape.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This was fun.
I want to thank Gerry again for participating in our Merry Mixtape series and for taking 2 hours late in his evening to come on and discuss his tape. If you'd like to listen to Gerry's mixtape, it's available on the Tis the Soundtrack YouTube channel and our website, tisthesoundtrack.com. Links to both are in the show notes. And I'd like to take one more minute for a final reminder that the Christmas Podcast Network is still accepting orders for a few more days for our 2024 Kringle Crew ornament, benefiting the Red Sled Santa Foundation. You can hear the details about this ornament and the awesome charity it supports in episode 10. Links to order the ornament are in the show notes and at tisthesoundtrack.com. You have until October 31st to get your orders in. Thank you for listening to Tis the Soundtrack, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of our Merry Mixtape series. This is Kevin Williams saying cheers and Merry Christmas.
I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day in the morning.